So welcome back to Everything Marketplaces. We talk with founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So this is episode 48, and I'm super excited to welcome on Rohan Katyal, who's currently product at Facebook, and before that led product at Yelp's Request a Quote marketplace. So Rohan, welcome to the group chat, and this is a long time in the works, so it's definitely great to have you join us here today. We have quite a bit to chat about, but before we do, maybe if you could start off by sharing a little bit more on your background for those that don't know you, and what led you to leading product at some incredible companies such as Yelp.
Awesome. Thanks for having me here, Mike. Super excited to be talking to people here. Yeah, quick introduction about me. Going long back, I grew up in India, grew up in Delhi, went to college there, majored in CS. I guess my first unintentional association with marketplaces was like growing up around like so many of these like mom and pop stores, and also this entire like unorganized services sector. Like growing up in India, like that was just all around you. Then that was kind of my first like exposure, unintentional, to like marketplace problems, like bringing structure to things, I guess. uh, After I moved to the US a couple of years ago for grad school, where I went to Georgia Tech, what you were just talking about. Again, majored in CS and design there. After Georgia Tech, I ended up joining Yahoo, where I spent a bunch of time in the new products team. My team's mandate was to bring Yahoo back to life. Uh, we worked on a bunch of different products like chatbots for teenagers and like AI assistants for Yahoo Mail, shopping assistants, and like Yahoo Knowledge Graph, like all of that stuff. After the acquisition, I decided to move on from Yahoo, and at that point, I had done a bunch of projects working with small businesses. That's kind of what got me excited about SMBs, and that's what led me to joining Yelp. At Yelp, my first role, I was the first hire in the experimentation as an experimentation product manager, where we're setting up a new team, product, platform, build out all of that jazz. And about 1 year into that role, moved on to the Yelp marketplace, where my job was to lead product for Request a Quote, which is essentially a messaging-based home and local services marketplace. That's Yelp's primary home and local services offering. Uh, Essentially, you can go as a consumer, you can go to the platform. Let's say you want to get a plumber, you search for a plumber. We throw a bunch of questions at you. You answer a couple of questions. We extract context out of those questions to match you with the supply that we have on the platform. Um, after working on the Request a Code for a while, last year I started thinking about what's next. When I met this team at Facebook, which is like a central team, which works on all the family of apps like Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook. Primarily, they grow like central levers for growth for businesses. That's what kind of got me really excited about that team. And currently, I'm working on building a new team focused on cross-family presence for businesses. Essentially, as a consumer, you're on WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook. Why shouldn't a business be able to do that easily? Primarily focused mostly on WhatsApp monetization. But yeah, here I am.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing with us. And I love that you brought up the initial kind of, exposure to marketplaces with the analog version. So
Yeah.
that's a first. So
Yeah.
cool. So I think many of us here know Yelp, from the consumer side of looking for, say, for instance, restaurants and, reviews. But could you maybe break it down for us a little bit as far as, the business and, how, Request a Quote kind of like fits within that?
Yeah. So uh, Yelp is essentially a local search engine where Yelp's mission is to connect people with great local businesses, where we help consumers who have certain needs and help find them like list rank businesses for them. Contrary to what most people believe, majority of Yelp's revenue comes from home and local services and not from restaurants. However, majority of our traffic came from restaurants and not from home and local services. But because home and local services, there's like a low frequency. So how that both fit into to each other, restaurants is a high frequency, low ticket size business. Home and local services is a low frequency but high ticket size business. So they kind of balance each other out in terms of that. Users primarily in terms of volume come to Yelp to search for restaurants, read reviews and all of that jazz. However, in 2000, I think was it 2016? I want to say 2016 is when home and local services became like a primary focus for the company, and also the company started thinking about how to leverage all the traffic that we're getting for restaurants, and try to connect them with businesses in other categories. And home and local services was a natural extension at that point, because that behavior already existed on the platform, but we hadn't like sort of built a product around it. Request a quote was an attempt to bring structure around structure around how hiring actually happens in home and local services. Majority of revenue for Yelp comes through, it's a CPC ad-based business. But I think it's like almost like all of revenue right now comes from that. But the company's been doing really well in terms of diversifying revenue sources. As you might already know, Yelp is known for its reviews. Like Yelp's biggest moat is the reviews that we have on the platform. Like the company goes like all in to ensure that all reviews are genuine, like invest a lot on the reviews, make sure the reviews are really, really high quality. Um, so also over the last 2 years, the company's been trying to figure out how to commoditize this idea of trust and also like monetize on this. So we've built a couple of different products that you might have seen. When you go to a business, you might see something like verified licenses on the business owner's profile, where you can see if this business has a particular license, what type of a business they have, and that's a paid product. Businesses pay about $1 a day to have that on their platform. Businesses can also like choose up to like I think was it up to 5 gems, 5 or 10, something like that. Don't quote me on the number, but up to N what we call business gems to showcase on their profile, where gems are something like Black-owned business, women-owned business, been in business for like 30 years. That helps them to showcase what's unique about them. And I think that's about like $2 a day. But if you buy it with like an ads package, it's like something else. So yeah, it's been majority. So TLDR of this, everything that I said, it's a local search engine. Majority revenue comes from advertising, but now the company's trying to figure out how to commoditize and monetize trust and make sure newer businesses can also thrive in this platform.
Got it. Got it. That's super interesting. So could you maybe share some of some of the unique kind of learnings with your time there leading Request a Quote?
Yeah, a lot of things actually. Um, I guess a couple of things that really stood out for me while working on this product was, firstly, advertisers' willingness to spend on a platform is directly proportional to the perceived lead quality. And what's interesting to note here is the perceived lead quality. It may or may not be the actual lead quality. And how it's really interesting how people inside the company view quality and how like business owners view quality. And I think that's not true for it's like that's more like generic. It's not just a Yelp specific thing. That's true like across the board. Like for example, like there are three, as we talked about, there are three sides of this marketplace. There's like consumers, there's like businesses, and there's also Yelp as a business as a part of this. They need to run a sustainable platform to keep this ecosystem going. For Yelp, quality of lead was essentially which would get like generating more and more volume of lead, and that's really tied to like how your business model functions. Are you a cost per click? Are you a cost per lead? Are you a cost per transaction business? And that inherently changes how you develop product. For the consumer, quality was perceived by someone responding in a timely manner, someone responding fast, you being able to see content, they being able to share past work. And for a business owner, quality was perceived as a consumer, like essentially consumers, like they were willing to pay for leads where they could see consumers communicating with them. It may or may not translate to a hire, but communication was necessary for them. So that was a super interesting learning for me that one, the advertiser was willing to spend on a platform was directly proportional to perceived lead quality by business owners. Second, was like businesses want to quickly like close the lead by jumping on a call, whereas consumers want to like conveniently spend their time and like price shop. Businesses are willing to pay extra to just get contact information. They just want to get on the phone. They believe that's their like best shot at like getting closing the deal. Whereas for the consumer, consumers get into this hiring journey, especially for home and local services, much early on in the process. They're at a point where they've just where they don't even most consumers, like if you, for example, if you want to go and get landscaping done, and you talk to majority of the people hiring on this platform, they'll be like, I have no idea how to even hire a landscaper. So first attempt of them reaching out is actually them trying to figure out how does one like actually hire a landscaper, and what is the average price around me. And that's when you start to like uh, then it takes you like multiple attempts to actually end up hiring someone. So that was super interesting as well. Like consumers want, like business owners naturally just wanted to get on the phone, close now. Consumers hopped on into this much early on in their journey and wanted to keep on conveniently price shopping. And that was the thing that annoyed business owners the most. Like paying for a lead that was never gonna convert really annoys them. Like that's what's like one of the biggest reasons why like business owners churn when you don't get like high quality leads. Um, and third is definitely focused around like trust. Like consumers only hire and communicate with like trustworthy businesses, and trustworthy is kind of it's something that the platform can define, or they can help to move in a certain direction. uh, for example, um, Yelp, it's more about reviews. If you have more reviews, you'll naturally do better on the platform. That's because consumers perceive these reviews as trustworthy, as genuine, and also inherently, because we've seen this behavior, product development at the company is also incentivized to upsell these reviews more. So it's like a self fulfilling prophecy that we saw this behavior and now we amplified it, and now it's going to be true because we've done that. And also you see this behavior across the board for Google. In Google has a similar like leads business called Google Local Services, where Google uh, showcases certain businesses with the Google guarantee label on them. Those businesses do much better on the platform. Um, Amazon has same. Like Amazon, I forgot what the phrase that they use. Amazon preferred, Amazon trusted. I forgot what the word that they use, but essentially, like consumers want to communicate with businesses which are perceived as trustworthy, and what trustworthy means is defined by the platform. So to summarize that, three learnings: advertisers' willingness to spend on a platform is proportional to the perceived lead quality. Lead Consumers only hire and communicate with trustworthy businesses, and businesses want to quickly close a lead by jumping on a call, whereas consumers want to conveniently price shop.
Awesome. That's really helpful. So thanks for sharing with us, and then we'll have quite a few questions about that.
Yeah.
So that actually led me to being curious about what was like the North Star metric that you're optimizing for, and then maybe some of the other kind of supporting metrics.
Yeah. North Star metric was, I guess, the one that we also like Yelp publicly talks about as well. Generate any, because request a code is like a sort of a startup within the company. It has product market fit, but it's not at the scale that Yelp, entire company functions at. Like outside, if you take request a code out of Yelp context, it's got product market fit, it's solid, it's doing really well. But as soon as you like put it in Yelp context, you're like, no, it needs to grow to be like at par with all the other products. Um, One of the biggest North Star metrics was volume of projects being generated, like number of leads that we are generating for businesses. And second was also like we were trying to maintain the quality of all the leads being generated. When you They were the two primary metrics we were focused on. The quality was self-reported by business owners. So as a consumer, you go to the platform, you fill out a form, I match you with a couple of businesses. Now businesses will talk to this consumer. It may or may not be a good match. Business owners can report whether this lead was something they serviced, they were hired, or they were not able to service this lead, and also tell us what reason they were not able to service this lead for. So there were a couple of reasons on the platform that you could report. There was unable to service due to the service area, unable to service due to the service offering. Um, and there was another, like a third catch-all phrase where if you could just like free-form text, tell us what happened. So we were trying to focus on two things: increase volume of leads and decrease bad quality leads. And bad quality was like a true measure of bad quality because it was reported by business owners.
Got it. Cool. And then I know you've given some great talks before about experimentation, some talks and kind of presentations. If you could maybe share a little bit more on that, just kind of like a, more of a high level summary, I think that'd be super helpful for us.
Yeah. Mostly what I talk about is how we scaled the culture of experimentation at Yelp and things that were like particularly interesting. I think some of the one of my biggest learnings from having built that experimentation program and platform was that experimentation is not about the technology. Like you could buy that, you could build it. It's not an unsolved problem anymore. But what is hard to scale is the culture of experimentation within a company. Like helping people be okay with the idea that you might have had a great idea, you were super excited about it, but then you ran an experiment and an experiment showed otherwise. And that's majority of the times that happen. The majority of the times you try to experiment, that's what always ends up happening. Getting people to be okay with this idea and letting this like automated system take control and make these decisions was like the hardest thing. That required us to do like a lot of like empathy building, helping people understand what's hard with experimentation, which was like running like a Yelp experimentation university, helping people understand the nuances of experimentation. Second, we also regularly started doing like a meta-analysis. Meta-analysis was where we would pick a random sample set of the experiments that were run in the company. We would we already had the recorded decisions and what decisions people took, whether they decided to ship it or not. And then we would get the data science team to dig into these experiments and see if they are, statistically speaking, if they aligned with those decisions or not. So that was super interesting on how many of those decisions would the data science team agree with, and how many of those decisions did what were the decisions that the product managers and the teams took. Uh, Needless to say, there was a huge difference. There was a huge gap between both of those, and we had to normalize the idea of like sharing those numbers openly and talking about those and helping like close the gap between all of those things. And third, we also started like an exec level experimentation review. It was almost like a scorecard of the entire company, where all execs, depending upon what like a VP director might be like wanting more detail, GPMs, group product managers might be wanting more granular level of detail. We created like exec level dashboards where you could see how many experiments were being run by every single team and org, and seeing the velocity of how many experiments were shipped, how many were not shipped, and also like the key metrics that the teams cared about, and what is the average metric movement they were able to like get with particular metrics, to see over time what has been the difference. So we invested a bunch in building all of these like automations and technology, but what actually gave us the real gains were not investing in technology. It was more investing in the people, in helping people normalize this idea of experimentation, learning it, and also like getting execs involved in this experimentation cycle and process.
That's really helpful. Thanks for sharing with us. So didn't want to focus on Yelp like for the whole chat. So if we could maybe jump over to what led you to joining the Facebook team?
Yeah, so I've always been always I've always in not always, but since I've been excited about like tech and working in like product and stuff, growing up in Delhi, I got exposed to a lot of mom and pop stores and small businesses and their problems, and like how like they function. How does like the day-to-day nuances of like running a small business has been something which has been really exciting to me, and something which I've always believed that tech is like super like well suited to help these businesses out. Like quite there are you talk to a lot of businesses, they tell you like they wouldn't exist if like Yelp or like Facebook or like Google, all of these platforms weren't like funneling traffic towards them. A lot of people also don't appreciate that you know about your local coffee shop, or you know about your local pastry shop, or your local like whatever restaurant you go to, like flower shop you go to every day, because of these platforms existing. And that's become such embedded in your everyday day-to-day life that it becomes hard to you take this for granted. You take this connection discovery process for granted. I think that's what kind of led me to Yelp, and the similar thing led me to Facebook. Facebook, what was really exciting was, I guess anyone who works at Facebook would say the same thing, but the scale of the problem. The scale is just like unreal at the company. The value it's creating for businesses at the scale it's creating it is just insane. And especially at my team, what I'm really excited about this particular team is the central nature of the team. Like, I'm not tied to any surface, I'm not tied to any particular product. I get to work on like the entire portfolio of products that Facebook has, and just build central levers, or build like cross family presence, or just like, like like the world, quite literally the world is your oyster. So that's kind of what got me really excited about the problem space. And also like the people in the team were super smart. I guess the first couple of weeks when I was at Facebook, I would just open dashboards and be like, what number is that? That's like way too many commas. How does that even work? I think that was super exciting.
No, I can only imagine that. So yeah, a lot of here in the group or in the earlier stages. So yeah, so I had a question for you. Just given your really incredible experience, on the product side with these companies such as Yelp and Facebook at scale, if you were to work with like an earlier stage marketplace founder and kind of translate that over, what would some of those kind of like learnings or kind of like tips be for maybe some that are looking to build, a more vertical local services marketplace?
Yeah. So I've actually been getting involved a lot in the Indian startup scene, and trying to talk to a lot of people who are working with um, like early stage companies and trying to build like marketplaces. I think that I mostly talk to them about like three things, uh, which I believe are like super important while building a 0 to 1 product, especially like a marketplace. First one is like the super cliched one, which is start with a healthy niche and a real friction to solve. That seems really, really obvious, but it's often the hardest thing to like figure out, like what's a healthy niche. Even when like I'm trying to build like product at Facebook or like talk to other people, you'd see people go to like such like specific problems that you would be like, why does Facebook care about that? But these very specific problems that seem tangible and real to you also seem tangible and real to someone else, and are the crux to scaling a product. Like Request a Code didn't get up and start generating millions of projects on day one. Day one, I wasn't there on day one, but like day one, it was probably solving hiring process for movers in San Francisco in like, 5 mile radius. Seems oddly specific, but this is what helps a product grow and help you get the initial footing for like being able to build a tangible product. When you build for all, you build for no one. So get a very like start with a healthy niche, and then a real friction to solve, and it should feel tangible to you. Till it doesn't feel oddly specific to you, do not like drill down further, ask the why at least 3 more times after that. Second is invest in matching by merchandising services. What I mean by matching and merchandising is, matching is the process of essentially matching the supply and demand, and making these connections in a much faster manner. Earlier, like in the 90s, early 2000s, you would see platforms only like list and rank all of these like businesses. Times have changed now. Business consumers are willing to take, consumers want curated lists, consumers want limited options. You want to give them the best options, because if you want, someone else will. Attention spans are decreasing. People do not want to do that anymore. Now, in order to actually match people and figure out what matching means in your context, you need to first figure out what is the atomic unit needed for matching here. For example, for Request a Code, the atomic unit needed for matching is the job that needs to be done, the service area that it needs to be done in, and the time it needs to be done in. There are three atomic units to defining its service there. And these three might mean something else in your context. Now, in order to leverage these for matching, I need to go through a process of merchandising. I think process of merchandising is what truly helps you develop a moat for your startup and your company. Merchandising is the process of getting these atomic units and services ready to be sold in a format that they can be sold in a digital way. In 2010, Yelp probably could not have built request a code because service offerings, service areas, and all of these things did not exist in a merchandise format. Now, Yelp has huge amounts of data, like can succeed in multiple categories across the board. It can be a request a code can be a great product for movers. It can be a great product for real estate agents. It could be a great product for doctors. But to be able to do that, we've invested years and years of merchandising those services and getting it to a point where we can digitize it. When a new company comes into the same, like no one can just get up and start building a request code and at that scale, because you do not have that in merchandise information in a structured format available online. And third is experiment with monetization strategies before committing to one. Monetization strategies, yes, obviously they define how you make money, but they also help incentivize your product development internally. All the decisions that you make add up, and they make it really hard to switch to a different monetization scheme. Play around with it early on. For example, the three main monetization schemes strategies that I usually see for local services and marketplace businesses is cost per click, cost per lead, and cost per transaction. When you're focusing on cost per clicks, you're focusing more on volume. When you're focusing on cost per lead, you're not focusing on volume, you're focusing on quality, and that quality is defined by you. And that quality is also something which you define, you develop a trust with your business owners, and you cannot change it once you've committed to it. And you make product decisions based on to amplify that definition of quality. For example, Thumbtack says, if we only charge you for a lead if you respond within 4 hours of waking hours, where they define waking hours as 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you don't, sorry, I messed that up. If you respond within if the lead was sent between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. and you as a business owner responded within 4 hours and the consumer did not respond, you don't have to pay for it. But if you responded after 4 hours, then it's your responsibility for that lead not having worked. These product decisions that you keep on making are really hard to go back on and change. And third was cost per transaction, which is the best suited like monetization strategy for early stage startups, because cost per clicks and cost per leads sort of inherently required you to be already successful. That's why you don't see many cost per click platforms. You don't see as many cost per lead platforms. Cost per transaction makes the more amount of sense. And I also saw Lenny had a great post recently on like figuring out your take rates for how do you define like take rates for cost per transaction posts. I think that was super interesting. So 3 things. Start with a healthy niche and a real problem that feels tangible to you. Invest in matching and merchandise your services. That will go a long way. And third, experiment with multiple monetization strategies before committing to one, because you will not only incur monetization debt, I guess, but also product development debt that you will not be able to roll back.
That's really great. So I'm going to have a question about monetization myself here in a little bit during the questions, but we're going to jump into some if that sounds good to you.
Yeah.
So, cool. Hey, Lucas, did you want to jump on first?
Happy to do so, Rohan. Thanks a lot for sharing this. There was a lot of insights and pretty far ahead insights. So it is really cool to see how far and how sort of confidently you scaled all of this, that you can just chuck out those tips that easily. I really like that. Thank you very much. There are lots of question marks on my side here, and I tease it that we are trying, I'm in the B2B construction space, and we are trying to evaluate, or one of the ideas that we have is whether we can do a request a quote on the B2B large scale construction rather than the little home renovation, etc. And the question that I would have, because you mentioned the price hopping around consumer, in my case, that would be the architect, and the architect is that whole artsy guy who does like that jumping around. how did you work around this pain of the businesses that said, I don't want the hopping around non-converting leads? And secondly, or maybe I would have a second question right after that, but maybe that first. How did you deal with that?
So, a couple of things in that. So your problem is specifically catered towards B2B architects, right? Like people who are working. When you say B2B, you mean like architects who are working on like offices for other companies and stuff like that. Okay, that makes sense. So how we saw that problem was, first, when I started to solve this problem, we saw this a bunch. Like people are just continuously price shopping, and that's a really annoying business owner. It's a waste of time. They have, like, small business owners do not have the bandwidth to go through 1,000 leads on different platforms and validate which one works and which one doesn't. So we initially began by first trying to educate the consumer. We added a question in the questionnaire flow if they're ready to hire or not. Try to get that proxy, but obviously, like, everyone just started saying yes to that. Yeah, we're ready to hire, just match us. And we also, like, thought about adding, like, guides where we could, like, educate consumers on the process. We also added, like, price guides on the platform, because if you're looking for price, even consumers, if I give them a price saying in your neighborhood, this is what the average price is based on, like, 10 real estimates, even they don't want to reach out to businesses. So that helped with that idea of, like, price shopping as well, by giving them and showcasing price and the information they needed up front. But as we dug more into this, we also came to the realization that there are certain categories of businesses that just need this. Like, this conversation just needs to happen. There is no way around it. For example, auto repair businesses. Certain auto repair businesses want to certain auto repair businesses would only fix headlights on a BMW after 2012, whereas others would only do it for, like, a Fiat made till 2007. There are oddly specific nuances in certain categories of businesses that make it impossible for you to take this step out. This is a natural part of the hiring journey. But what's interesting here is to segregate your product and your platform based on that, which is to say, you need to identify the categories of businesses on your platform that are okay having to deal with this friction, and the businesses who are not. For the business categories that are not willing to take this, you need to figure that problem out. But for example, for me, for contractors, for example, for automobile, this wasn't a problem I needed to solve. This is a problem they face in the real life. This is something they understand as a part of their business. You can't expect a consumer to get up and know the nuances of contracting. Like, and there's no way Yelp can educate, or anyone can, like, educate. Like me, I'm the least handy person that exists. You can't pay me enough to, like, read about, like, contracting. You need to solve this problem for me right now. So yeah, I think the key distinction here is, like, figuring out which categories of businesses need that versus the categories of businesses that don't need that. Now, I'm not sure if this is an accepted practice for, like, B2B architects, but maybe it's worthwhile for you to, like, talk to a couple of them. Also, I remember talking to, like, an automobile business owner when they were giving me some feedback about request to quote, and they said something pretty interesting. They said, I'm okay. So we were trying to focus on a problem where we validate leads, send only high quality leads to business owners. Whereas this business owner said, I'm okay receiving a high quality, a large volume of leads and investing in, like, validating them, because that's how I function in everyday real life as well. This is not something that I'm not used to. So it's no worse than what happens right now. But I'm okay educating the consumer, but I don't want to I don't want to be paying if I only receive, like, 5 leads or 10 leads. This again falls back to that idea of, like, perceived quality. They're okay having 1,000 leads, out of which only 10 might be high quality, but they got to talk to 1,000 people who now know about them and they might come to them later. But they're not okay just getting 10 leads and all 10 converted. Which seems counterintuitive, but that's how they wanted to function. For the other 990 that did not work out, they develop their brand with them, and they will come to them later on in the future. So those conversations are also worth monetizing, but maybe you could monetize those at a lower rate. to incentivize retention.
Okay, no, that does make sense. And the notion of perceived lead quality was also very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. A follow-up question I'd quickly have would be, because you did mention merchandising and you did say curation, obviously that is a very important point. Do you have a measure for, or firstly, how did you score the suppliers then, the businesses for the customers? Did you do that at some point? Because I would really be interested in how well the scoring, like how well was the scoring or the curation part perceived by a consumer, or was that not part of your time there?
Yeah, so that was definitely a part of my job. My team owned this like matching algorithm where we would take in context from consumers and match them with businesses. But if I'm being honest, that's not a real problem for a company of Yelp size. And that is because we've invested in merchandising these services. So we merchandise all these service offerings, surface areas, and like ways to provide us your availability. And then we've also invested in business owners when they onboard. We've invested in the onboarding process where business owners can tell us what services they want, what service areas they function on. So for any particular lead, like as a consumer, if you go create a project on Yelp, we can easily find you 4 businesses. So there's no real um, there's obviously like ranking in the sense like how much budget does someone have left, advertising budget, and factoring in like budget pacing. That's kind of what dominates the ranking. It's the problem with Yelp isn't if we have enough businesses who can do a project for you. We can find you like 30 businesses who can do like fencing in some suburban Arizona. That's not a problem. For us, ranking is more so dependent upon how much ad budget you have, help you get the best leads, pace out your budget so that you can optimally spend it throughout the duration you wanted to spend it on. So it's like, I guess the problem it's the same like ranking scoring problem technically speaking, but the motivation is very different for a company of that size. But when you don't have, there are definitely categories where Yelp doesn't have like adequate supply, which are like fringe categories, which are probably not worth investing in either. I'm sure if like ever that becomes the focus, that would be a concern. But there was so much juice left to be squeezed out from like the bigger categories that there are like hundreds and hundreds of categories on Yelp. We never like got to the fringe ones.
All right, thanks a lot.
Hey, so I actually had a question for you myself, and that is, with the request to quote as far as on the consumer side, were you finding that they were basically sending out on the consumer side, requesting multiple quotes from multiple kind of providers? And then how did you kind of limit that to, a certain number? So that way on the lead side, it wouldn't just be like price shopping or?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, that was obviously happening. Business, um, consumers were continuously reaching out to businesses. And we had also, I think the main value add of request to quote was to be able to get the price from multiple businesses in the first place. We made it really simple. 2017, I think, we launched a product called Multibiz, where you're filling up you're filling up a form, you just like click a check box, and you get matched with like multiple, like I think what is 4 or 5 more businesses, something like that back in the day. And that just like shot up the volume of leads being generated, the value being created for businesses and everyone, until like consumers started requesting again and again and again and creating multiple projects. In order to tackle that problem, we launched a new flow where, let's say you create a plumbing project, but you go and you try to create another plumbing project I forgot what the exact criteria was, but in the next like n days, during the creation, we'll give you an option to match it to combine those 2 projects and add the new matches within like the same like project. And we also started doing like smart optimization of leads where, for example, you have a project, you can, if you were in the inbox, you can add more businesses. We'll always show you more businesses to add, and we show you basic stats about them in the inbox. And also if a business has business marked a lead as like unable to service, we'll replace it and like match it with another business owner and like stuff like that. basically like making sure people can get through one project with like a single, sorry, with get through their like own hiring experience to like one project, and not having to create like multiple projects and like spam multiple different um, businesses again and again. I think that really helped with decreasing this. And also, as I mentioned when to Lucas's question, showing business, figuring out why business consumers were actually messaging multiple businesses again and again, because some of them wanted to price shop, some of them just wanted to learn about how this works. We started showing that information upfront. You didn't have to message a business to learn about the price. You didn't have to message a business to learn how this landscaping work in Arizona, for example. So those things also really helped in reducing spam.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, I actually was curious on that because on the studio time side, we were thinking about doing that kind of in the past. But on one end, since it is such a, we have like such density in certain markets, we didn't want to overwhelm the studios with, too many requests.
So. Yeah, so that this also like ties back to what your monetization model is. Like if your monetization model is just cost per click, if it's just an ad-based model, you're not incentivized to decrease this behavior. You're only incentivized to decrease it if you're like a cost per lead, if you're only charging businesses with a certain quality of a lead, more so if you're like a cost per transaction business. Like if you invested like a decade of building like an ads business where you're throwing volume at people and suddenly realize, oh, quality is the reason why businesses churn, then it's just not it's a very hard thing to roll back.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So cool. I'm not sure if Bruno's going to jump on with this question. Actually, Gordon, hey, do you want to jump on?
Hey, Mike. Rohan, that was really interesting. Actually fascinating. We'll go beyond interesting. So one of the questions I have is that, you've obviously worked for huge companies, and you even talked about, Yelp is known for its restaurant reviews. And so it seems to me that when you have a large company like this, you're fighting for attention, right? So you have this huge restaurant reviews business, and you're building this new, nascent rocket ship. So if you were launching Yelp for Business as a standalone, how would your approach? Let's say we called it YFB or something. Yeah. How would your approach have been different? How would you start and what would you have done?
Yeah, that's a great question. That, as is the case with like any big company, you could go to Google, you could go to Facebook, you could go to Yelp. There is very limited prime real estate for growth in terms of notification channels and this thing and everything. Everyone's just like trying to get on that. So this is always a problem. Like everyone wants to be on the homepage above the fold on an iPhone, and your products suddenly start growing, your team's goals are suddenly going. Always a big point of conflict. But if I had to like launch a completely, I had to launch like Yelp for Business for like a completely independent from this like entire like the main Yelp product. I think my first step would definitely be to identify like a healthy niche to help figure out like what is the problem I'm having on a day-to-day basis that I think other people might also be having, and that feels ridiculously specific. Like hiring movers in San Francisco in like the zip code 94105. I think whenever I've worked on launching a new category at Yelp, which sort of in the beginning feels like a new business because you don't have any support from leadership to be like, oh, just slap it all over the product. You need to first like prove it out, figure out product market fit. That's always been my approach, to find businesses in a particular neighborhood, talk to at least 10 of them on what are the day-to-day problems they're facing. And you'd be amazed, like just 10 conversations can just teach you so much about how people function that you had like no idea about. Like there's no way for me to know how someone hires a real estate agent and a doctor and a dentist and like, like a mover. I haven't gone through all of these experiences. So figure out like a oddly specific service area, figure out very, very specific, like single category, talk to businesses of those category, try to like ace it with that particular category, and then eventually grow one category at a time. That's actually what Thumbtack did as well when they initially like started out. Over time, they've come to hire category managers who are people who essentially like own categories. It's their job to continuously keep on talking to business owners, update the questionnaires and the hiring flow and the information we showcase on the business profile. Now, this might solve the supply side of the problem, but but definitely not solve the demand side of the problem. Now, demand side of the problem is something I don't have like a good answer to, but because for me, my cop out answer here is I could like slap it on Yelp's homepage and I got demand from like the restaurant side of the business, but that's a real problem. Like I do not have a good answer for that.
Hey, solving 50% of the, answering 50% of the question is amazing. We'll take that. We'll take a great answer for 50%. Thank you. Okay. Appreciate it.
Well, if only we could all have that homepage traffic of Yelp, right?
Well, that homepage traffic for everyone is Google search.
Yeah.
You could pay to slap your ad there.
Yeah. Most of us do. So.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, Bruno, you ready? Want to jump on?
Hi, Ron. Yeah, very good presentation. And actually, and a little bit as a follow-up from Gordon, but also from Lucas. I work in Booking.com, so I think you almost answer, or you gave the answer that I usually give when you have to think about the demand, how you attract the demand, and you just put it on the top of Booking.com, and then demand will come. So that part is answered as well. I was trying to think maybe you figure out a new way that I struggled to answer myself, but you also talk about like something quite nice, even just look to this 50% of the equation. So on the supply side, and talk about the atomic units, that's also very cool concept. How do you define when is actually good enough, or what is the tipping point to say, if we're going to focus in this postcode and we only focus, for example, in home renovation, when do you consider that your marketplace is actually on the right spot to say, okay, from now on, we're going to actually try to, put it out there, and we have enough coverage to actually not, like, for example, start to actually like backfire against you, right? That people actually are trying to look for the merchants, and all the time your marketplace will say, no, it's sold out. Then you actually end up shooting yourself. So how do you actually make that decision?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So that again depends on the category you're playing in. Like, are you playing with contract? Let's take the example of local services here. Are you working with plumbers here? Are you working with contractors here? Are you working with like real estate agents? Contractors don't need more than 2 to 3 leads a month. That's at most they can handle. A lot of contractors actually are very seasonal advertisers. As soon as the summer hits, they get so many leads that they don't need to come back to advertise for like months. So they're like necessary churners. Like they churn out because of seasonality. Like they don't have the volume and they won't like waste their money there. Plumbers are the sort of businesses where there are high frequency, low ticket size items, and a lot of them actually. Plumbers are like a very big emergency use case as well. So are locksmiths. If you're dealing with like a plumber or like a locksmith, you could be like an Uber for plumber, Uber for locksmiths. Like that's there for the taking. You can't do an Uber for contractors, for example. So how much coverage you have is, I guess, it depends on like what industry you're playing in and what category you're work functioning with here, and what their hiring cycles look like. Hiring cycles, and also like more so the cycle for them to like complete their entire job. How much time does that entire process take? Are we talking days, hours, months? Like there's a reason Uber for like ride sharing exists, because that job on average takes 15 minutes to complete. It has like high accuracy, high predictability. You can think hours ahead. You can plan out like you can plan out like do capacity planning and like network optimization. Contractors has a really high uncertainty around it. So I guess that's like a function of uncertainty and job size in the category we are playing with to figure out how much coverage is enough. But now that also there's more complexity to it once you say I'm starting out in a zip code versus I'm doing it in a city versus I'm doing it in a country. Like it just adds so much more complexity around how do you optimize this network, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
That's a good question. Hey, so we're almost out of time here, but I did have a question because I thought this would be pretty well suited for you, which was, we have a lot of product, I would say product focused marketplace founders in the group that are looking to hire their first PM. So kind of like, what kind of advice would you give to founders that are looking to do so? And just based off your experience.
Yeah, that's a great question. Last time I also, when I was like looking for jobs and stuff, I talked to like a lot of like early stage startups and companies that I was excited about. I think I'm just going back on my experience, the ones that seem like super exciting versus the other ones that just seem like project management. I guess one of the biggest thing is don't make it sound like project management. Like that is like the biggest like turn off for like product folks. Essentially, like that yes, I have to do a lot, like a decent part of my job is project management, but that's like part of my job I hate the most. Like no one likes creating like sheets and changing statuses of projects on like Google Sheets. That's like the least fun part of my job. The most fun part of my job is actually being able to set strategy and being able to talk to business owners. I think the jobs that kind of excited me most gave me freedom to decide the direction of the product, gave me a large part of ownership, like ownership of like the product, and also work directly with like the founders to be able to set the direction. It wasn't where I was told, this is your job, you work in this sandbox and this is all you do. It was more, that's like the entire excitement and fun about being at an early stage startup, that there is no sandbox. The sandbox is what you make of it. So helping like PMs define their own sandbox, I think is the most exciting thing that would attract product folks to your company, and be as far away from the project management side as possible. Like, do not even say that in front of PMs.
Cool. That's really helpful. So cool. Well, this is a really great chat. So definitely appreciate taking the time to join us and share more. We've definitely had quite the mix of questions, and given that I would say most in the group are probably earlier stage marketplace founders or PMs themselves. Is there anything that you like to leave with us?
Man, I haven't started an early stage company or early stage startup. So super, like, a lot of respect for all of you. Hopefully I will be there one day, but that's super exciting, and good luck with stuff. And if there's any way I can help by maybe introducing you to people, other PMs, or like any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. I'm sure you'll get quite a few messages in the community after this, and roped into some advising maybe too. So cool. Awesome. Well, last but not least, time for a kind of quick plug. Where can we keep up with you?
I can share my LinkedIn and also my email address on the community. Feel free to reach out on that.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks again. This is really great. And thanks everyone for joining.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.